Welcome to another episode of the DH Effect, where we pledge to have a decided heart through taking personal ownership and building high trust relationships with one another and creating a place of belonging. This is what we call the decided heart effect. My name is Hillary, and I am joined by my lovely co-host Sonia today. You might have to be careful and do a double take there because there's two people that look like Sonia today, but we'll get to that in a second. Today, we're going to do things a little differently, aren't we, Sonia?
That is right, Hillary. So our world today, we have experienced a lot of natural disasters, from volcano eruptions to wildfires, tsunamis to earthquake, and now this long-term experience with the COVID pandemic. And sometimes, most times we're feeling really overwhelmed, shifting through all the information that's out there, and then determining, what do we trust? What do we trust in order to make our decisions? So today we have this incredible expert panel representing the Design Network for Emergency Management, also known as DNEM, D-N-E-M, and they're going to really help us sort through all of this. These award-winning designers and scientists come from all over the world. Literally, I can't wait for you guys to hear where they're coming from. And they come with this very specific mission to work with, for, and alongside communities to make sure they are safer before, during, and after emergencies. And how timely is it for us that you are coming to us today? And then a side note, just in case you might recognize, but I literally probably am the better looking one. There is my twin sister, Claudine. She is one of the expert panelists, and she's going to help, along with her team, help us cut the cognitive noise so we can make safer choices. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you.
Welcome. We would love just to hear a little bit about yourselves. If we could start, we're going to start with Claudine just because our viewers, some of them have seen you before in one of our episodes, and then you can pass it off to whoever you want to. But if you could start, just give us a little bit of background about who you are, what you are to this group, and how you became involved.
Great. And I thank you, Hillary. And I'd love to say my sister is 12 minutes only older. I just need to put that out there. She's like, oh, there's that moment again. Thank you so much for having me back on, but also inviting this wonderful group that we sort of found each other. So my decided heart moment was, me wanting to be a forest firefighter when I was 18, and my parents were a no-go on that. And actually, not made me, but pretty much made me go into art school and into graphic design. I was always searching for a way to serve the public. This was something I felt very much as part of my childhood, a career that had a contribution. And so it was me wanting to serve, and as a graphic designer in a traditional sense, working on ads and so forth, I just wasn't satisfied. So I joined Search and Rescue. I kept these two worlds apart, and then found a way in grad school because I really was horrible at search and rescue. Horrible. Had to get rescued in all these great ways that gave me humility, sent me to grad school, and came back and said, you know what? I can serve the public being a designer. I thought I was in my own world there, trying to, carve out this little place that didn't exist. And then I met Tingyi. Tingyi from Taiwan. We were at an information design conference. And I believe it was there I shared this, and Tingyi was like, me too. Through that exchange, her and I were like, we should start something. This was, gosh, at least 10 years ago. And DNEM started to formulate in the background, a group of designers, of experts who were interested in this public service, advocating for the public in times of crisis and the way design can help with visual communication. So that was my decided heart moment. This is the seed that started with, can we get a group together to really facilitate this internationally? And we are in year 5, I believe, as an association, year 5. Same group, our membership's building, and we could talk more about that later. But I will now pass the mic on to Tingyi because it's 6 a.m. in Taiwan, so she gets the mic.
Hi, I'm Tingyi. Yes, good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me. And actually, I devoted into information design for more than 10 years. Not only working on practical design with young designers in my lab at National Taiwan University of Science and Technology, I also conduct research so that we can do design better for our better living environment. As Claudine mentioned before, actually, it's been a great pleasure for me to serve as a board member at DNEM. It certainly is a memorable moment that I remember. Yeah, about 10 years ago, I met Claudine in London. And after a couple of years earlier, for our first meet somewhere in the world, I can't remember where, in a conference. I remember both of us did our presentations about our research papers and started to know each other, as Claudine just mentioned. And I received an email and we talked and got very excited to ensure that we share the same interest and enthusiasm in information design. And at that time, as a young scholar, 10 years ago, as you can imagine, who was lacking experiences like me, couldn't imagine what amazing power that an international conference could possibly bring. I was so glad and honored that 5 of us connected online and formed DNEM in, I think it's 2016, and finally physically got together in Los Angeles, in USA in 2019, and I appreciate it a lot. Yeah. So I'm going to pass to, on my screen is Rodrigo.
Thank you, Tingyi. Well, thank you, Sonia and Hillary, for this invitation. My name is Rodrigo Ramirez. I'm connecting from Santiago, Chile, and a proud member of this group of researchers and makers. For me, I'm an information designer also, and coming from a country like Chile, a natural laboratory for disasters or for emergencies, it became natural also to focus my work in design in emergencies, crisis. So I started to work in I designed also typefaces, fonts, and icons. So I joined it, I mixed everything in a project called GEMIL or GUEMIL. And it's a project of icons for emergency. It's an open source set of symbols for public display of information before, during, and after an emergency. So I think in 2017, I met Claudine, Saskia, and then we started DNEM. I remember especially that moment when we met at Chapman University in Orange County in 2019 also. Yeah, well, for me, it's very special to join this event today because I'm convinced that for a decided hard effect, you have to put passion in the work that you do. And working with students, as Tingyi said before, you have the opportunity every day, the opportunity to transfer this passion to your young designer, young researchers. So coming from the communication, the visual communication, the design of information, I try to give, to pass, but also to hear this energy, creative energy every day. So many thanks for this invitation, and I pass the turn to Saskia now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Hi, my name is Saskia, and I'm based in Leiden, which is between Amsterdam and The Hague in the Netherlands. And I come from a very scientific background. So I am trained as a geophysicist. That's what I got my master's degree in, and then eventually went on to get a PhD in remote sensing of active volcanoes. And my decided heart moment really came in 2008 when I was on the ground in Nicaragua looking at a volcano called Masaya volcano. And we were driving around there as a group of scientists for about 2 weeks. And we were driving through an area on this volcano, which is called, we refer to it as the kill zone, because nothing will grow in this area. The gases that come out of this volcano are so toxic that you'll only find a couple of really hardy plant species like grasses that'll just cling on. And in the middle of this sort of desert area are small communities, and there's people living there, and there's children there, and they're going to school, and they're constantly surrounded by these toxic gases. And all of a sudden, it just clicked for me that just going there to collect data as a scientist wasn't right. And we needed to somehow be able to talk to these people and also hear from them what it is that their concerns were. And that's when I started turning to design. And then I think it was not quite 10 years ago. I'm hoping it was 2014 that I met Claudine and Tingyi in London at this conference. And that's really where the ball started rolling. And after that, I also ended up doing a degree in design to get that as a complementary skill. And right now I'm working in the humanitarian sector, working on humanitarian innovation. And actually what I find there is that I'm bringing in these design skills and design methods that I've learned and applying them to other challenges. But once again, a lot of it comes down to communication and bridging communication barriers. And often the way to bridge that is visual.
So powerful. I have so many questions, but I did want to give you an opportunity. Did you want to do a shout out to Klaus?
Yes, let's do it. So I don't, Claudine, do you want to do this, or shall I have a go?
So our fifth executive board of director member is Klaus Kramer, and he's from New Zealand. I was referred to him by Catherine Gillison from Canada. This is very international. Information design is very international at a conference.
It's fun. I love that though.
And he was doing an app called Floodscape. And it was a proposal for New Zealand is the epicenter for tsunamis. And he developed this prototype where it would actually tell people in their hand how far the tsunami will arrive in their area, the countdown for that, and where to go in real time. It was a phenomenal piece of proposal. And that also made me think he is also interested. He's a designer. He teaches at the University of Wellington. And we got him on board. We were saying, this is the place for you. And so that's our shout out to Klaus. He can't be here today because he's teaching. He also teaches at a university, undergrad design students. So yeah.
It's amazing. Sonia, aren't you I'm struck by...
I'm so struck.
I know, me too. Not only by the background, the intelligence, but actually the passion and the energy. Each one of you, as you're speaking, just I can feel your hearts are in what you do. You truly believe in what you do. And it's such an honor, again, to speak with you. Can you lead us down the path just a little bit before we dig deeper into, we keep on saying information design, but for those people that are out there listening or watching and they're like, wait, information, what does that mean?
Right.
Can you help us? Who would like to go?
Well, information is maybe one of the elements more abundant today in our everyday interactions. You need information for almost everything. And specifically in the context of emergency, you will need more and more information. So it's very important to give a shape, but also understand what I am doing, what I am seeing. And for me, the most important part is what are you doing then with the information that you have seen and then you have understood. It is possible to take a safe decision, for example, or to know that everything is going okay with the moment. So yeah, this is the combination specifically between information design and emergency management. But information design is the design of information. It takes a visual form initially, but also affects all the interactions that we conduct every day. Surely my colleagues will add more precise definitions.
I was actually going to add a much less precise definition.
Well, I have something to admit. I got my undergrad in communications, and I'm like, oh, I know about communication. It's the nonverbals, it's the verbals, it's the tone, the pitch, all of those traditional ways of communicating with one another. And honestly, Claudine had to handhold me for me to truly understand what information design is. And so we'd be walking down a street, and then she would be like pointing to a font of a store. And I'd be like, that's just a font. Why are you making me study this font? You know, and she was really, what you said, Rodrigo, is that we take advantage, I think most of us, is when we see visual cues, we automatically respond and act on it without knowing. And then that's what the first time Claudine said, stop and think. How are you reacting to that visual, that icon? What is it making you do? How are you influenced by that action? And I just was like, mind blown. And then you all are the think tank of designing shape, color, like when, where, what, to really impact action. And you did say that this is critical. The visual communication in a crisis is critical. Can anyone speak to that?
So it's partially, if I may go ahead, a very large part of that is because we, as humans, we visually process information much faster than information that we read or that we hear or that what our other sensors are telling us. And so during an emergency, time is often of the essence. And so the quicker that you can get information coming into you and that's automatically making you perform a certain action or turning a certain way or moving in a certain direction, the more likely you are to stay safe during that emergency. And this is why the visual component is so salient and so important in our work.
You know, it's interesting to me as well. Have you noticed a shift or a change through time as well? Because I think we're becoming even more visually rich in our world. I know from a teaching perspective, we're told that if within the first 5 minutes of introducing a new concept, if a visual doesn't coincide with that, the student is less likely to be able to retain that and have it become part of their knowledge. Are you seeing that your work is being sought after even more now than ever before?
I'll speak with, I do mapping. I do public facing maps in Southern California, actually for the state of California. First it was tsunami. It wasn't so thought out because we don't think about that as a main hazard here on the coast. That was usually just from the governor's office. But I will say fire, definitely the need for that visual, I call it imprinting. And yes, I'm referencing the Twilight series.
Team Jacob. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Exactly. How do you imprint? Because they weren't doing a very good job of it, and they just did not have. And I say the emergency management, the decision makers didn't have the tools to communicate with the public in a way that would be relatable, accessible. So I will say in my work, especially with fire, I have seen an increase in, Claudine, please speak to our people. Please give them, and it's really spatial risk awareness. So they understand, do you live in the wildfire hazard? And if so, do you know more than one way out, and just in case, because fires are very organic. So that's from my perspective as far as seeing that increase.
A little bit more. For me, I think the visual information as a visual could do both. One is fast delivery and for the communication, but another side is it also slowed down because it has the visual is so important. Even though we have a quick reaction when we see the icons or those visuals, but also it contains a lot of cultural background. And we absorb it without thinking. So, and that's why it's so powerful.
I'm thinking about the old school maps. I don't know, maybe many of ours like, what old school maps, where it was so detailed oriented. And I think before, like the information, I'm calling it a revolution because our patience level, I'll just speak for myself. My patience level is this small now because I don't want to read that much text. I just don't, I've got things to do and I can just scroll on my phone and I want one word or one picture to tell me what to do or get my information. And it's so interesting how we used to have these roadmaps with all these details. And for me, that would cause frustration. And I think to act upon that, it takes a lot of time. And I think, like Tingyi, you were saying, culturally, I think we're just becoming impatient to read through things, to get accurate information. And with the DH effect, trust is so important in terms of living with a decided heart. And trusting information is, I think, one of the things we don't think a lot about. How do you compromise that? Building the trust with just an icon or visual communication, where then people are making the right decisions. Do you guys talk about that when you design?
I think you just touched upon something really interesting, and you were saying, it takes time. And this is the really interesting thing about our work. For example, what Claudine just referenced, these fire clear maps or the tsunami clear maps, the public are actually presented these when they're in a normal everyday situation. And it takes time to learn what to do, but most of us are visual learners. So if we're confronted with the same cues over and over again, we start to learn what to do. For example, a lot of us won't have flown in almost 2 years now because of the COVID crisis, but we will still be able to repeat what you're supposed to do. You put on your own oxygen mask first before helping somebody else, and then you follow the guided pathway lights to the exit. We still know that because that's been drilled into us. And in a way, that's what we work towards. It's presenting information before something goes wrong so that you get sort of drilled into you in the background what it is that you're supposed to do when you do find yourself in an emergency.
And I'm marveling too. It's funny, Sonia and I are actually working on a chapter for a book, for an anthology. And we were just saying today, it's easier to work on a book than it is to work on a chapter, because to take and drill it down and get it so simple. And so your work must be, you're like, oh, it's just a picture. Oh no. What goes into some of these decisions so that it is accessible to everyone, so it is trustworthy, so it is drillable, and people who have this bandwidth where when you're in an emergency situation, you're trying to think of so many things that you don't have the bandwidth to try to translate. What goes into that process?
Well, in my opinion, and in the case of the icons for emergency, one of the key aspects is to measure performance. Testing the interpretation, collecting different interpretations, maybe observing also the cultural background, the language where these interpretations are made, the familiarity with the scenarios of emergency. When we conducted, for example, the Gamel test in Asia, sometimes we collect some interesting observations different from that cultural background, but sometimes, for example, if you don't know or you don't live near to a volcano, for example, you will interpret totally different that elements of information. If you are familiarized with the tsunami phenomena, probably you will make other interpretations. Past year, for example, we collected different interpretations from the icon, from the duck icon, the drop, cover, and hold. It's totally different from every part of the world. If I can make a difference, it's different from people that is familiarized with the earthquake and people that is not familiarized with the earthquake. And in this way, we have plenty of stories about interpretation. So for me, it's very important to measure performance, to collect the most of data in order to know how this communication is performing finally.
Oh, go ahead, Claudine.
Oh yeah, this is the designer's like just hardest thing. It's like, how do you drill it down? And to even push it further, what the trust part is not just the trust from the public's point of view, but also trust in what we do for decision makers, like emergency managers, to trust us, to say, you know what, my maps lie. They're not accurate. I'll take your GIS maps, but they're not going to be accurate. And they have to trust that that's the right decision, even though it's against what their practice is. We did a workshop to make design accessible to non-designers, to emergency managers. This is where we got a grant for all of us to join at Chapman University to run a 3-day workshop with all of these emergency managers who knew the value in design, but had no access even to begin how to use it. So we had to get our craft and our skill in a way, and Hillary, like you were saying, get it into a package that made it sense to someone who's never thought about design in this way. And from that workshop, we learned a lot, right? Because we were able to be empathetic and understand their points of view, what they had to be responsible for. But we also were able to put a workbook together in order to say, this is actually too much information. This is the right amount. This is what's usable to them. And it really, like Rodrigo said, it is about including people in the process. It's not this, let us go in our room and do our thing and then come back out. It's including the public in those performance measures and the data. Hey, we want to hear from you. This is about you. Participate so we know if it fails or not. And also on the other side with emergency managers, including and not, breaking down those territories or those walls of disciplines.
Wow. One thing that I found truly fascinating, you use the word lie and trust in the same sentence. And that's just usually like, how can you can't trust someone who lies. And I think what's so, again, another mind-blowing experience is, what is the outcome? What is the outcome of the message that we're trying to solve? And the outcome is to keep people safe. And, in a state like understanding brain and thinking and emotions, when we react, sometimes we, there is that forgiveness. Like when we're not as accurate, the brain doesn't need that accuracy. They need to know how to get to point A and B very, very quickly. And I find that so truly amazing that, and the hard work of convincing those who thought, no, accuracy means trust. Have you had a lot of conflict in that, or was it just more of a, hey, when I'm exposed to this, I understand the intent of DNEM in general?
I mean, my experience has been amazing. Emergency, once they understand it, they understand pretty quickly the value, and the trust is there. I will say being academics does help. I use that card a lot, because otherwise they peg me, and this happened in the beginning. You're from the art department. What are you doing here? And not that like cutesy, like, what are you doing here? It's like, literally, what do you have to contribute? And so I understand my position of privilege. I understand that being a professor, having quantitative data versus qualitative, even though one is not overpowering than the other, I'm able to use a language that they understand in order to gain that trust. And then after that, it's just outcomes. It's getting public feedback that's really positive, right? That kind of helps support the work.
I'm thinking about, inviting people to the room. Like you said, you don't just go in the room and create this and then come back out, because that would be, quite frankly, that would be very ego-centered, right? Like, let's just produce what we think works in a vacuum, without asking anyone, right? How on earth, I'm overwhelmed thinking you have so many people. You have people with also visual impairment, but you also have people with other, language barriers, deaf, so many different cultural contexts. How do you even start? Because I would think that you could almost do a million different icons and have it mean something different to every single person.
I think that's one of the big challenges that we're facing. And I think you actually touched upon two different elements there in what you were saying, is that one is, you've got all of these different people and you want to bring them together and work on the same thing. And then actually there's also a lot of people who are not going to respond to a visual for whatever reason that might be. Either it's, either they are visually impaired or they are culturally not in sync with the visual that they're being presented with. And these are all things that we have to think about and that we have to take on board. That's not to say that that's easy at all. But one of the things that you can do to get around issues like that is actually to consider, we have 5 different senses. We can make use of more senses than one when we're designing information systems. So think, for example, of a siren, that's another information system. But to bring it back to the airplane, you normally see the video as well as getting the audio cue from the loudspeaker system. So there's already 2 things telling you, giving you the same information, but it's more broadly accessible that way.
It means so much to me to hear this conversation, because I do think as parents, as educators, let's bring it to a different level. We're talking about an emergency situation, but I do see so much frustration and distrust of communication, partially because everyone's coming at it with, this is my information, this is my information, without thinking about somebody else's point of view around it and how they can actually help show a different perspective. So it's interesting, even though we're talking about emergency information I remember being told when I was parenting, I was frustrated one of my kids wasn't being able to clean the room the way that I wanted it to. Well, it was kind of arrogant that I thought that when I said clean your room, he knew exactly what it meant, right? But so the tip I was given was do it with him and then take a picture and show him and say, this is what I want it to look like every time. And I wish all of the things that you are such scholars in and scientists in, we can use in our everyday life, in how if we're just curious and our goal is really to have common understanding rather than just to get someone else to figure out the way that we see things.
Well, and then I was gonna say, you model it as a team. I mean, not only are you representing 5 different countries, backgrounds, each of you have a very particular skill set. You have decided to come together with all these different ways of how each of you may look at design. Do you guys grapple with that? I mean, maybe purposely too. Like Claudine, you're with mapping, Rodrigo, you're with icons, and we've got apps and research. And I just think what a great model it is. Like when I listen to you, I want to come away with, perhaps I can engage with others with a little bit more patience and maybe asking more questions than coming up to the answer. So how do you guys do it?
I think the more diversity, our diversity, I have to do a shout out to, this is more touchy-feely, but when we first saw each other, it was after 3 years. We just saw each other online, and then we finally got them on planes and came to Chapman. And I will say this, and maybe this is we love each other. It was like, it's this true diverse group from all over the world. And then that in person, you just immediately knew, like, what you're seeing, what you're feeling as far as our passion and our work we have towards each other. And it's that, I just wish the world, just like diversity, accepting such diverse backgrounds and expertise, but we had a shared passion for doing good in the world, contributing. And it was there, I'm a people person, and to feel that relationship just also transcend, not just our work, but our individual work and our work as a group, but also this is real, like this is a real connection that the 5 of us have. I think the diversity, Sonia, is the part that makes us the strongest part of us, is having that diversity and those different backgrounds. And we really know how to, it's an example of interdisciplinarity at its best, of collaborations, because sometimes collaborations could be, you do what you do best, you do what you do best, and then we'll kind of mesh it together. But we truly are in each other's business, kind of in the most wonderful way.
Yeah. Well, I will add very briefly to that we learn a lot from the other, from Saskia, the scientific approaches, Tingyi from the work with students, working in technology, from Claudine. I remember always our very interesting conversations about graphic design and how this have evolved into information design. So I think we learn a lot in our experience these years. We have learned a lot from the other.
Yeah, I would like to add on too. Actually, I got a lot of energy and inspirations from all our members and boards at of DNEM. And I enjoy very much about our meetings, even though I always need to wake up early. And I think that's the good to start with my day. I always enjoy our meetings and we have had, and always anticipating the next meeting after one another, and that's amazing. I think the great interest set an anchor for me to focus on what I want to do, but a strong group of people to support and to collaborate with could bring up our strengths in order to make the things forward. Yeah.
That is such a beautiful thing, because I do think that so many people have been brought up, at least in the United States culturally, to think that you're supposed to do it on your own, right? You're supposed to be successful on your own. But the reality is, I mean, the humility that I feel from each one of you in your own right, you are each superstars. You are absolutely phenomenal human beings, right? But then to come together with humility and say, but I know I can still learn from you, and I'm curious, and tell me more, and lean into it and do it with joy, that sense of belonging. I know, Sonia, you've said before, that's the #1 indicator of success, not just at colleges, but beyond that. You can find that everywhere. And so you have created this sense of belonging that elevates your work to an even higher level, which then gives the public an even safer and more trustworthy information and ways to follow things. It's absolutely remarkable. I just want to applaud you all.
Yeah. I was like saying, oh my God, they are the DH effect.
Right?
Because like we have these pillars, like it's about self, sense of self-discovery and who am I in this place, in this world. And then it's like, well, how can I develop these high trust relationships? Right. And now to do that, it's to be trusting of others and to earn trust. Like, are you trustworthy? And then that sense of belonging, it takes work. It's not just who are my people? Where are my people at? Like, they got me, they got my back, but what are you doing to contribute to that place of belonging? Because there is that accountability of working towards maintaining that sense of belonging. And listening to you all, like, first of all, finding each other, trusting each other, and then really elevating and pushing the work. I mean, you are changing. When we talked about creating impact for a community or society, for you, it's worldwide, and it's saving. I don't want to be dramatic, but it's saving lives at the end of the day.
It's not dramatic. It's true, right?
Okay, good. Yeah, I want to make sure it is saving lives. Can I just talk about belonging in a bit? So there's a sense of belonging within DNEM, but also Claudine has revealed some of the work where you guys are talking about, the projects, and you always ask, who isn't here? Can you speak to that in terms of your target or the public? Who is missing in this conversation? Who brought that up, and why is that so important?
I mean, this is about the inclusion and just designing for all. And how can we say that? Have you guys heard of the term design with instead of design for? So with design means you design with people that you work with. So your people that you're designing for, the public, has to be inclusive of everyone that represents that public. The public, and as Saskia was saying, is a very tall order. And I will say this, just working with FEMA, it's a struggle to make it a first thought. And that's where if we can just make it a first thought to say, let's design with the public and who's missing from this representation, whether you're hearing impaired, whatever your abilities, whatever social economics, geography, where you live. And it's still a struggle to have that as a first thought. It's usually like, oh, and by the way, we got to make sure we have multiple languages. We got to make sure it's like this. And I would like to see that switched. And I'm really fighting for that. On the federal level, it's slow, but we do this project and then like, and by the way, now how does this translate to someone who can't see, have a visual impairment? What's the other, like Saskia said, what's the other sensory that we can offer? So who's missing is the constant question that I wish was first in all of our projects with the stakeholders that we work with the decision makers, from my perspective.
I think it's also a question that we are seeing more broadly being added across government projects, et cetera, but also across commercial projects, because in the past, the attitude was very much, okay, we learned for this, we know what's best. Whereas what you'll find is, okay, you have a lot of knowledge, but you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle when you're standing there by yourself. And you often require a local perspective, and you're not going to get that from, you know, somebody who might have been imported from wherever. They come with a lot of knowledge, but they lack that local sense, that tacit knowledge about an area. And that is also required in designing good information systems.
I love that. I mean, it really is. It's funny. We find this as an overarching theme. I feel like curiosity has to be one of the #1 skills that we all need to have. It seems like such a soft thing, but it's not. You always have to ask that next question, or you can't get to a really good, effective product or communication, whatever that might be. You know, I think it's amazing. One kind of last questions as we wrap things up. What advice do you have for the public in how we make decisions on interacting with information, finding things that are trustworthy? How can we make our best decisions?
Who's going to speak to that?
Well, I'm mid-grant writing right now. I have a grant due over this group. I'm working on COVID messaging this past 2.5 years. And doing a visual analysis, just looking at what has the CDC given us as far as the public, what has California Governor's Office given us. And then I compare it to governments like New Zealand, who was super top heavy controlled, where there was really no micro versions. It was just one visual campaign over and over again. It is difficult. We understand the public's difficult, challenging of getting through a slew of information under crisis mode. And it doesn't have to be screaming in the streets crisis. This is a sustained and anxious 1.5 years, right, and politics and all of these other things playing into it. For the public, it is going to social media has been what I have found in my research, and I'm working with FEMA, we're working with Twitter right now to see the biggest competition is a deluge of information that's not credible. That's not, you would get a agency who would tell you what to do, and then it's 18 seconds, and then already it's toppled with other, you know, a neighborhood who found a picture of the fire or whatnot, and that supersedes. So it is really being more critical. I think, Sonia, as going back to my tour of fonts, that's, you know, on the street is, visual literacy is lacking, I think, just overall, but yet visual is the main media that's distributed, because reading is also visual. Being more critical and making sure, because I know Twitter has those little seals now of credible information, and trying to just dig one more level deeper in what are you reading from whom. That would be something, because I understand how frustrating it is to have to, you're then placed in a position, the public, to have to, you know, cipher what's real, what's not.
I think looking at the source of the information is also really important. That's something you can really easily do as a member of the public. You can see, okay, was this my neighbor from, you know, 10 years ago who shared this, and is she a credible source, or maybe she's not a credible source? And that's something that you can easily do, and think twice before you share something, because a lot of what's out there is not true. And if you're sharing it, you're only contributing to this confusion. Mm-hmm. So maybe just read through and don't share something unless you're really, really sure of it and you have credible source to back up your opinion or your statement.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just have to put an exclamation point on that. Just because it speaks to a belief you might have does not mean that it's credible, right? I mean, I think that that's what's so important is I feel like there's a lot of people out there, and if they read something and they're like, oh yeah, that's what I think, then they're done. They don't ask the next question. They're not curious. Rodrigo, you were going to say?
Yeah, well, I would like to add that working with people, or designing specifically with people, it takes a lot of time involving them, trying to include and always looking at some groups that probably will feel excluded. So it's very important to involve, but to include, integrate minorities or people that are out of the mainstream that you are designing. For example, we have designed a set of elements for COVID crisis that we are translating texts into indigenous languages. Not just the hegemony of English, Spanish, or French and German, but we are doing Maori and English, or here in South America, Nahua, Mexican Nahua, or Paraguayan Guarani, or Chilean Mapudungun. So I think you can make a difference when you display these everyday elements of information in your language. Is speaking like you, or speaking your own cultural roots. So it's a very beautiful example of how could you, with a little effort, you can include or make feeling people included in a design process.
That's so beautiful. Tingyi, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we close out? Everybody sort of had a chance to say.
Yeah, I think actually, I think is the most important is as a designer point of view, being a good design is have an empathy. So it's not only like I do or I provide information for you to believe me or trust me or just do what I'm telling you to do. As a designer, we always thinking about who is the stakeholders, who is the viewers, who is the users. So the empathy and also bring our skills and our knowledge to embrace those representation, no matter it's objects or tangible or intangible. And so I think that it's kind of a cross-disciplinary work we are doing, and that's why it brings how important the design could bring such a better environment for the people. Yeah.
Wow. Well, go ahead, Sonia.
You've planted a seed in my mind, because right now, in terms of the empathy, I'm thinking about my neighborhood. And as I was listening to all of you, I'm thinking about, do I know my neighbors, but do I truly know them? Now I think, oh my gosh, the woman across the street, should there be emergency, she cannot walk quickly. She will need to have assistance right away. There's a family who's Brazilian and may not know like the icons right away. So for me, I'm taking it home personally and a sense of belonging starts in my neighborhood. And am I aware of my neighbors? Am I aware of the needs? Because if I want to be safe for me and my family, to me, and it's a safe neighborhood, it's a safe community, and always thinking of that. And I just so appreciate you planting that seed in my head, because my awareness has really expanded. So that's it. That's just my reflection moment right now.
No, Sonia, that's beautiful. I'm so glad that you said that, because I was thinking something similar, not as eloquent as what you said it, but just the idea of, again, asking the who says. That goes all the way back to, we've been saying that a lot this year. Cassandra Speaks was a book that we both loved. And there was this idea of who says, this information, who says. And I love, again, the inclusivity, the belonging, the trustworthiness, the intention, the passion, and the joy. You all are showing up with so much joy in what you're doing too. I mean, which is amazing to me, because it's a pretty heavy thing that you're doing, and you're doing it so beautifully. So thank you. How can our listeners find out more about you?
Our website is a great place to start. So DNEM.org. And we are also on Facebook. And no, Facebook is, the young students are like, we don't do Facebook anymore, but we have Saskia, sign up for our newsletter. We have a really great newsletter that goes out. Saskia is the author of that. It's super good. And that's how you can start getting involved. You could see our members list, because we do have members that get nominated, and then they're voted on as part of the extension of our work. So those two places would be a great way to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are going to list all of the links everywhere and all of the postings so that our listeners and viewers can just simply click on that. And I'm assuming membership is the academia world to join the work that you are doing. Is that, or do you have cheerleader members?
And if so, why not?
No, you so want to be on, you want to start that member tier.
We're working on that. We'll make it for you.
Yes. Well, I could just imagine like the work that you're doing is like there's a supportive membership, like that's not part of the think tank, you know, or maybe it's your pool of people like to ask the questions, and then there's the think tank. So anyways, that's what
I love that. And that's where we're slowly thinking of that. And like membership, there's no fee. We don't get fees for membership at the moment. This is all think tank. Really, we have a lot of emergency managers. We have a lot of scholars, you know, academics. But I do think, like you said, Sonia, there's a value to also opening up the public sphere. If you're going to do with design, you know, this would be our next. We want to also have a student tier. So students who are learning and who want feedback. So we're working on those kinds of programming things.
Very, very cool. Hillary, anything to end before I close?
No, I am so grateful and just really, it truly is a gift to have you here. And thank you for the work that you all do to keep the entire world a safer place.
For sure. Thank you everyone for joining us for this week of the DH Effect. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and all the podcast platforms that you listen to your podcasts on. So Spotify, Apple, Google, all of it. And then we are going to continue this conversation on our Instagram account and Facebook. So we have a Facebook too. So join both of our Facebook page. We hope you found something that inspires you to take action in your life. Perhaps for this episode, it's about learning what to trust. How do you vet the trust in getting accurate information to make decisions? And we have to emphasis on the and, looking around to ensure that everyone is safe. Ask the question, who is missing? Until next time, may you have the courage to live with a decided heart that is anchored with self-discovery, high trust relationships, and belonging. Thank you, everybody.
I learned through emergency management that the public has to rely on themselves. If there's a big disaster, the public, especially in the United States, right? We have this false safety that everyone has a police officer, a first responder dedicated to just them. And this kind of self-resilience, the self, you know, taking care of oneself, you were reminding me of this. And for the public to have more self-empowerment, that they can do that because they've been taught all these years that rely on first responders, call 911. And for the first time, I've heard emergency managers say, we've got to shift gears. They've got to be self-reliant. We might not get to them for 3 days, and that the public can do it. Like you said, you were saying, looking at your neighborhood, I can assess my neighborhood. I can see who needs help, who doesn't. I think we need more of that kind of shift in the safety preparedness culture, if you want to say, especially in the United States, when that has been taught to us that, oh, someone will get us, you know.
Yep.
Well, and Claudine, really, that goes to so many different levels. I mean, we just had a conversation with a domestic violence. Well, she calls herself a survivor because she's thriving now, but she said it's the same thing. You know, we need to, and racism and like all of those things, it all comes down to the same thing. Take an active interest in one another and actually make those connections, right? That we're going to work together to keep each other safe, to keep each other healthy, to keep each other moving forward.
And one orientation that maybe is useful to make a last comment is about the moments of crisis or emergency. Maybe the best moment to learn, to hear, to see is before everything. So you're more able to learn, to hear, to practice. Then when something started is the opposite. It's the worst moment to learn something new. You're just conducting your experience in a instinctive way. So
one of the key skills that we need, and actually it's a key skill that we use as a team, is the ability to listen, to sit back and actively listen to what another person is saying, and not just having it go in one ear and out the other. You know, sitting there and listening and trying to really understand where they're coming from and what their perspective is, rather than immediately pushing back with whatever perspective it is that we might have. And I think that's so key in how we manage to function as such a diverse group, and also so scattered all over the world. But I think it's also really key in processing information in the wider world.